Okay, so what if I told you that the single biggest thing getting in the way of your happiness is your constant effort to be happy? I know, it sounds completely backward, but that's the game-changing idea we're unpacking today from Dr. Russ Harris's incredible book, The Happiness Trap, and trust me, it flips everything we've been taught right on its head. It all starts with this powerful paradox. See, Dr. Harris argues that our relentless day in, day out pursuit of happiness is the very thing making us more miserable, more anxious, and more depressed. It's a pretty wild claim, isn't it? So let's actually dig in and see how this trap really works. Just think about it for a second. Have you ever been caught in that loop? That moment where you're telling yourself, come on, I should be happy right now, but trying to force it just makes you feel worse? It's like you feel broken for not being able to just switch it on. Well, you're not alone. This is an incredibly common experience. Dr. Harris tells this amazing story about a client of his named Michelle. She came to him and said this. I mean, on paper, her life was absolutely perfect, but inside, she was really struggling. And her story just perfectly illustrates the trap. It's not about what you have. It's about the internal battle you're fighting to feel a certain way all the time. And that's really the core of it. The happiness trap isn't a real place. It's a prison built from beliefs we've all soaked up. Beliefs that tell us painful feelings are bad, they're a problem, and we need to get rid of them. But as we're about to see, trying to fight your own human nature is a battle you are never, ever going to win. So you might be wondering, if this trap is so bad for us, why is it so effective? Why do pretty much all of us fall right into it? Well, the answer is kind of fascinating. And it turns out it's not really our fault. It's a mix of the cultural myths we're told and, get this, our own ancient brain wiring. We get fed these myths constantly. Myth number 1, happiness is the natural, default state for all human beings. But the reality? A rich, full, meaningful life is always going to include the entire spectrum of human emotions. Crisis, disappointment, sadness. These aren't signs that you're defective. They're signs that you're human. And this goes way, way back to our evolution. Our brains, you see, were not designed for happiness. Not at all. They were designed for one thing, survival. For hundreds of thousands of years, the humans who are the most obsessed with threats, the most anxious, worried ones, they were the ones who survived and passed on their genes. That danger scanner part of our brain is still very much active. But today, it's not looking for saber-toothed cats. No, it's scanning for a critical comment from your boss, the chance of embarrassing yourself in public, or the fear of being rejected. And our ancient brain treats these modern worries with the exact same life or death urgency. Harris explains this with such a powerful metaphor he calls the struggle switch. Imagine every time you feel anxiety or sadness or doubt, you have a choice. If you decide, this feeling is a threat, I have to get rid of it, you flip that switch to on. And it's just like struggling in quicksand. The more you fight and flail around, the deeper and faster you sink. So how do we escape? How do we flip that switch off? Well, the book introduces this powerful framework called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, or ACT for short. And the whole point of ACT isn't about getting rid of bad feelings, but about fundamentally changing your relationship with them. And this, right here, is where everything changes. The goal is no longer about chasing that fleeting feeling of happiness. Instead, the focus shifts entirely to building a life that feels meaningful and purposeful to you, a life based on your deepest values, even if pain and discomfort are along for the ride. ACT breaks this whole escape plan down into a really practical roadmap. First, you learn to unhook from those difficult, sticky thoughts. Second, you learn to make room for painful feelings instead of fighting them. Third, you get crystal clear on what you truly care about, your values. And finally, you take action, guided by those values. Okay, let's get practical. I mean, the theory is great, but how do you actually do this stuff in the moment? Well, ACT is just packed with these simple but incredibly powerful techniques you can use anytime, anywhere, to unhook from the struggle. So let's take this thought. I'm pretty sure everyone listening has heard this one before. It's a classic from our mind's greatest hits collection, right? When we're fused with this thought, when we believe it as absolute, 100% truth, it has enormous power over us. It dictates what we do and just drains our energy. Now look at this. It's a tiny change, but it's so powerful. By just adding that little phrase, I'm having the thought that, you suddenly create a little bit of space. You're not in the thought anymore, you're observing it. You can see it for what it is, just a string of words and pictures your mind produced. This skill is called diffusion, and it's a total game changer. Here's another cool technique, simply thanking your mind. So when your brain starts its usual broadcast from what Harris calls radio doom and gloom, you can just internally say, "Thanks, mind," and you do it with a bit of warmth and humor, not sarcasm. It's just a way of acknowledging, hey, I see you're trying to do your survival job again, without having to buy into everything it says. And all of this brings us to what's called the choice point. In any difficult moment, you're at a fork in the road. You can make an away move. That's something you do to avoid discomfort, like say procrastinating on a project you're scared to start. Or you can make a towards move, a small action guided by your values that moves you toward the life you want to live, like just working on that project for 5 minutes. So, when you put all these pieces together, what does it all add up to? It's really about a fundamental shift in perspective. It's about moving from a life spent chasing a feeling to a life that is actively and meaningfully lived moment by moment.
And that right there is the ultimate takeaway. A rich, fulfilling life isn't a life without pain. It's a life where pain no longer holds you back from doing what actually matters to you. Discomfort stops being a stop sign and instead becomes a kind of compass, pointing you in the direction of what you truly care about.
Harris shares this quote in the book, and it just perfectly captures the whole spirit of a values-driven life. It's not about seeking comfort. It's about choosing adventure. It's about deciding where you want to go and steering your ship toward those shores, even if there are some scary monsters growling at you from the deck. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. Based on what truly, deeply matters to you, what is one small, concrete towards move you can make today? It doesn't have to be big or dramatic. It just has to be a step, however small, in the right direction.